All right, it is 5:30, so I will go ahead and call this Board of Selectmen meeting to order on Thursday, June 11th. I thought with my left hand it would have been a little softer, sorry. We have a few guests on the phone this evening, so I just wanted to remind people that pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Adams Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort has been made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided in the order. Despite our best efforts, if we're not able to provide for real-time access, a recording of this meeting can be made available as this is being recorded. I am going to allow one more person into the room, virtual room, sorry. I have a phone number, area code 413 with the last four digits 4338. If you could please state your name for our attendance.
Yes, Lou Moser with ACS Girls Softball.
All right, thank you, Lou. And so for everybody who's on the call and in the room, in the physical room, the Board of Selectmen's room, are the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen as well as the Town Administrator. On the call this evening is Town Council Ed St. John, Deb Dunlap, Administrative Assistant to the Town Administrator, Donna Colton, Lou Mosier, Courtney Canales, all members of the public. So I welcome you. If anybody else joins the meeting virtually, I will let everybody in the room know that so that we know who we have in the room. With that, the first order under new business is the reopening of parks. It is my understanding that members Duvall and Bush have agreed to work with a small group of town staff to look at the guidelines and provide some recommendations. So I will turn things over to Member Duvall to.
Did you want to say a few words, Jen, before?
No, go right ahead, jump right in.
All right,
okay.
I just have your email here.
No, that's fine.
Okay, as the Madam Chair has indicated, at a recent meeting, I think it was last week.
It was Monday.
Monday. Monday of this week.
Feels like no.
Yeah.
It was a month ago, but it was Monday.
So we discussed the businesses having the opportunity to reopen with outside meals and also with drive pickup of food. So we have put together a plan for the businesses to move forward through this current phase. And then the discussion led to, well, also the governor, the lieutenant governor have indicated that the youth organizations can also begin in phase 2, I believe it's phase 2, part 2, that the youth organizations can begin to develop plans, the communities can, working with the youth organizations to begin reopening the parks and playgrounds. So, since I brought it up, I was given the great opportunity of leading this effort with fellow Selectman Jim Bush. The town administrator has been supporting the effort, and he has identified 4 individuals from the town that will be supporting this effort. The goal for the Select Board is to provide the guidelines for those organizations who wish to use the field consistent with the governor's regulations. So that's our ultimate goal. And so the first step for us is to conduct a meeting with a team that from the town that includes our inspection department, community development department, and our DPW department to come up with this plan. And I'm not sure, I'm sure we have a few individuals who called in that are very interested in this topic. And if you read the rules for phase 2, part 2 for using fields, it's, I think it's going to be interesting how it's going to be able to go into effect. I'm sure other communities, and like Pittsfield and Dalton, they've started to move forward, as we're going to do the same thing. And I'm sure other sports organizations throughout the county and will have ideas to use for what the rules indicate. So they're pretty strict at this time for this Part 2, Phase 2, or Phase 2, Part 2, I'm sorry. So we do have a group that is going to look into this. The town administrator indicated, just as an initial date, of July 6th is when he would like to see the plan from board member Bush and myself. So, but we haven't really talked to the committee yet that's going to be moving forward on this. Signs need to be purchased, need to be placed, as part of our plan, placed at all of the playgrounds and sports fields. I would imagine that each organization that's going to use the fields will have to have a plan developed that will be reviewed in some type of process. But again, we're going to have our first meeting. Has that been set up yet, or is that?
Spoke with Deb. She says she's waiting for everyone to agree on a time.
Okay, so we're just trying to get everybody together. So our first meeting will be soon, and then we'll move forward from there. So, Madam Chair, other than the Board of Selectmen, if they have anything to add, I'd like to hear from the individuals on the phone and see what their thoughts are. So I've heard from the Little League organization, and I believe they are not going to move forward this summer with their Little League season. They've been working with organizations out in the county to see if their players that want to play are able to play in other communities, and that's a work in progress. But that organization has decided, because of the limitations and the rules that need to be followed, that they decided that they're not going to have the league this year. And that was decided by the Little League Board of Directors. Madam Chair.
First, I will open to anybody on the board if anyone has any questions, comments with what John just shared at this point. Okay.
I'll give just a little bit of context. As John said, he's focusing specifically on how the fields will be used by our amateur and youth, adult amateur and youth teams to use it. The municipality has to look at this as a two-pronged approach. Number one, what about our open spaces and playgrounds? I would anticipate an opening around the July 6th date, which is probably going to be a use at your own risk scenario. There is no way for the municipality to enforce social distancing or any of those other rules at those facilities. The second prong is when we open fields back up for use. As John said, there are significant, if not onerous, regulations that the executive branch has sent down to us, and that's really what needs to be coordinated. So if I had to guess today for those folks on the phone listening, that would be what the prediction is, which is, as John's saying, we need to buy signage, et cetera, for it. None of that is very difficult, just needs a little bit of coordination. But I can't press upon enough that at this point, a lot of these things are becoming self-regulating. For example, we did not take down our basketball hoops, other communities did. We don't have the staff to police those facilities. So we do occasionally see pickup games occurring at these locations. How is the municipality going to police that? So that's some of our concerns about officially reopening these facilities, is the fact that the touching of the same ball on top of each other, these things which are now proven to prevent the spread of COVID-19, social distancing, in a contact sport like that does not happen. So I just want to set the context of kind of the predicament that the municipality's in. If we keep the facilities closed, we fully protect the public health, but we also have an enforcement issue. If we reopen the facilities, we risk a public health issue and an enforcement issue, because again, how do we enforce it? So at this point, we feel the best approach is going to be use at your own risk, but then help our organizations that want to use the fields for structured play with understanding these guidelines, so that we can get up and running. So I just want to give everybody a little bit of a context that it's not as easy as just saying, here you go. We wish it was. In fact, closing turned out to be a little easier than reopening, but we'll get through it.
Thank you very much. So I will open it up to any members of the public who are on the call. Looks like you've all muted yourselves, so thank you for that. But feel free to unmute yourself, state your name, and let us know if you have a question or a comment.
Yes, Lou Moser here again, and completely in agreement with.
Hold on, Lou. It's a little quiet. I gotta turn up the volume. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Lou Moser, ACS Girls Softball, and completely in agreement with what Mr. Green said. We're just trying to get smarter on all of this process, just like everyone else is. Not really looking to push and expedite anything. We certainly don't want to go backwards. We just want to, be abreast of what's going on, educate ourselves, be as smart about whenever we are able to, because, we offer the program. Obviously, the spring has been essentially scrapped, and we offer, a summer program, and then we do some things in the fall. So even if it was, late summer to the fall, where we were able to actually have some activities, we want to do it the right way, and nobody wants any of this to go backwards. So
Appreciate that perspective, Lou. Thank you. Donna or Courtney?
I second what Lou says. We have a lot of anxious kids who would love to get out on the field, but their safety is our utmost importance right now. And, we'll do what we can to work with the town to hopefully make a season happen for them.
Thank you, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
Courtney, I don't have to put you on the spot, but if you did want to say something, this would be the time.
No, I'm just in agreement with everything.
Okay. Thank you.
The last thing is, I'm just speaking for myself. I just believe that after what Jay had to say, the way forward will be, we're going to rely heavily on the leadership of the leagues to work with us to get through these next couple phases. So the leagues could provide a plan on how they're going to meet the regulations, and then it comes to the board, we approve it, and then the leagues can, when that day comes, the leagues can move forward with what's in their plan. The next phase comes when we have to update the plan, and we'll move forward. I think we're going to have to, with the amount of employees we have to verify what's happening on the fields, that we're going to, I think the plans are going to be what we're going to need to move forward. But we'll meet, we'll discuss, and we'll get back to everyone, all of the league presidents and the representatives, when we have a plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else on this topic? Okay. Well, I appreciate both of you volunteering to work on that. So keep us informed, and we'll keep that on our agenda. Okay. Great. So under new business, the only other items are the interim police chief interviews. We have one scheduled at 6 o'clock, so I'd like to go ahead and just take a brief recess and see if our first candidate is here. Those of you who have attended in the public, feel free to stay on if you would like. But if you were only here for the reopening of parks discussion, that piece has ended. So, and I thank you very much for calling in. Great recess. Okay. I think that everything is on and working. Great.
Chairman is actually, sitting, Mr. Plunkett sitting. There you go.
Hi.
Hello and welcome.
Good, how are you? Good, thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, not shaking hands with everybody.
Yes. Pre-COVID, we all would have stood up and shook your hand, and welcomed you to the town of Adams. So we are happy that you're able to join us this evening. So thank you. Just a couple of logistical things. I did want to remind you this is a public meeting, so we do have an open line. Currently, we have members of the public who are on the call. Currently, we have 4 people on the call from the public. One is our town council. One is our administrative assistant, and we have 2 members of the public, Donna and Rena, who have joined us by phone. And as I stated, it is a public meeting. I am recording this. I don't mean to be rude, but I will have to be looking at the computer from time to time to make sure that things are working, and if there's anybody else who has to enter the room. I will do my best to notify you and the others in the room if anybody else should be joining us virtually. So just please, my apologies up front for that. Pre-COVID, I was much more, I had many more manners than apparently I do now. But again, I just wanted to welcome you. My name is Christine Hoyt. We spoke on the phone on Monday. And again, thank you for accepting our invitation. I'd like, just for a moment, if all the members could go around the room and just give you their name. I know we have our nameplates, but instead of handshakes, it just seems to be the nice way to do that. So I'll start.
Hi, my name is Joe Novak.
Rick Williams. Jim Bush, Vice Chairman. John Duvall.
Jay Green.
All right, so now you know everybody in the room. All right, so Eric, I'm going to turn the video on you and not on me so that those who are following at home can see. And I will start with the opening question. So if you could just briefly and just generally tell us how your professional experiences and skills line up with the duties and responsibilities of the Chief of Police for the town of Adams, and what specifically makes you the right fit for our community.
I've been in this field for over 33 years. I spent the entire time building it. One of those that when I was a kid, I played basketball with someone who was a cop. So it's something I've always wanted to do. When I did decide to go this path, I was lucky enough to have some great mentors to point me in the right direction. With the guidance I need, show when I was backing off a little bit, and push me into unknown and uncomfortable areas. I worked my way up to patrolman. I originally started prior to Woonsocket. I started as a special officer in the town of Cumberland, which is the town I grew up in, Cumberland, Rhode Island. It's tough working in the town that you grew up in because you know everybody. And when you pull over people for DUI and you've had coffee with them, it's a little uncomfortable. It's time to move on, kind of thing. Plus, I was young. I was looking for the city of violence. So I went to Woonsocket, had a great career there. I became full-time in 1992. I was with the gang task force. I was with the, I was an FTO. I was with the SWAT team. I did everything I could get my hands on to try to expose myself to everything I could. I had some fantastic mentors. Both of my mentors came from there. One good chief there was interim. He was fantastic. Was a Rhode Island State Trooper there on interim basis. So I'd like to follow his footsteps someday and that kind of thing. I also had some great captains and lieutenants that had won on chiefs in Massachusetts, which I still rely on a regular basis. I've taken the classwork I can. I've jumped on every training I can as far as management. I've gone through FBI leader programs, gone through some of the command and control programs from Roger Williams University. Prior to starting my career, I was in college. I was 18, young and dumb. I was probably the only guy you ever see the club canoeing. I was just having too good of a time. I wasn't ready for it at that point, so I had the opportunity to become a police officer. Life gets in the way. Met my wife. We had 2 great kids. My education went on the back burner. As my career, once I left Woonsocket, I went into other the operations commander, over in Lincoln, New Hampshire. Great opportunity, the full leads in the fall is nothing better than that. Big, contrast, big difference than, working with soccer any time of year. That was nice, I learned a lot. I had a chief that was hands off, so I did everything with budgeting, to running the day-to-day operations of the department, to internal investigations, to discipline, it all fell under me. Unfortunately, my father was sick, had cancer, and I had to return home. It was a job I would like to have stayed at. You do what you have to do for family, that's one thing, is my family's always been first, no matter what. Even though it put my career on hold for 2 years, it was something I needed to do. Went to, for a couple of months, to Franklin, New Hampshire. That was just all the way over, because the goal was to go to Colorado. My wife had a career opportunity up there. Went on to Colorado. I was certified, went to the academy out there. Had a job with one of the sheriff's departments, which I thought was a great opportunity to go along with my wife's great opportunity. 3 days before the moving truck came, my kids had a breakdown, and I packed up my truck and lost my deposits and everything I invested in out there, the house and everything. Drove back and started over. Ended up in Vermont, had a great opportunity. There was a sergeant, I was hired as a sergeant. They had a gang problem, that was my background, so it was a perfect fit. You know, one last, when you say there's gangs in Vermont, they picture college walking down the street with chains hanging from their neck, it's like a stereotype kind of thing. It's not that, it's the real deal out there, which I was surprised at. So I enjoyed that, but Vermont as a whole at the time, wasn't very active in that. So I was able to get that going there through training. Most departments had no idea what they were looking at. I took the initiative, I started an intelligence group throughout the state. It ended up growing to the point where we were able to push through some legislation, to actually have gang training included in the academy. Same kind of stuff I was dealing with, you know, Vermont I was dealing with around, we had street gangs, motorcycle gangs everywhere. I actually dealt with a lot of gang members from this area, Pittsfield and Long Island, Hills Angels and the rest of them. It's a fact of life, it really gets to everybody. Day to day, it's troublesome. I got to the point where my kids were, done with school, they had made their decisions, and I followed up on the promise I always made myself, go back and finish up my education. I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree at my 50s. Probably a waste of money, I hope not, but, I'll probably be paying it off until I leave this earth. Kind of late this decade, but it was something I thought was important, something I promised my mother to be pushing back. She was an engineer, so it was always, when you go back to school, I thought it was important for my career. So, it was important for her, it was important for my kids. To look at that and say, listen, dad gets his education, maybe someday they'll go back and do it themselves, at least finish up. Had an opportunity to become a chief here in Massachusetts. I was here for a year and 5 months. The community as a whole was fantastic. I really had a strong connection with them. Spent a lot of time with the seniors. That's what I like about the small community as opposed to the city, because I could slow it down a little bit. We didn't have a lot of kids, I think we had 9 kids, so I couldn't take care of that aspect of it with the seniors, which is very important because of my mother. She was the director of senior services for years. So, we got a strong connection, community outreach with the seniors. Council on Aging, I was there for all the luncheons. I was well received there, and I know they definitely have a place in my heart. There were some great people there. Enjoyed it. We also started a good morning senior program to check on our seniors. They would call in between 8 and 10 o'clock on weekday mornings and say, hi, this is Beth, I'm alive. All is right with the world. And it wasn't just to check on, it was a matter of, it was an opportunity to have a conversation with them. A lot of them were not leaving the home at all. They didn't have any family, that's why they're involved in this to begin with. They lived by themselves. Prior to that, they were days without any contact. So the morning program, even if it was a 15-minute, sometimes it would become a half hour, they took care of us, but they were fantastic. It was a great program, it was something I was very proud of. And it got to the point where I left the department. It they're conflicted with my, personal and professional ethics, so it wasn't a place I could stay. I found it necessary to leave. I notified them I'd be leaving at the end of my contract. And I retired. I wanted to take some time to think about it, because I love what I do. I figured I'd be going up the door to be first. So we're leaving 55, I'm like, well, maybe it's time, but I've been off for, well, almost a year now, but for the first 6 months before this popped up, it was nice for a month. I rode my motorcycle a lot. I spent a lot of time with my granddaughter, which was fantastic. The greatest thing, you know, that's even better than my kids, my granddaughter's awesome. But this is what I miss. This is what I love to do, so something I'd like to come back to. I feel like I have the skills and, skill sets that the town could use. I know, like I said, some of the drugs that we dealt with, came to us, about that, I was skilled. I know I've checked the ID. Some of the gang problems we had came out of this general area. I think that knowledge and my skill set would be a nice fit. I think I still have a lot to offer, the troops inside the department. 33 years of knowledge, I could be able to teach someone something along the way.
Well, thank you. Just with the windows open, the traffic is a little loud. Those who are on the call, are telling me that they can't hear anything, so I'm gonna move that speaker that is near Joe. I'm gonna put that on your table. I'm gonna come near you to do that. And I just asked that the other board members, you'll get it? I'll just ask that the other board members, speak loudly, but to allow us to have people also, still have some comfortable air in the room. And we did wipe down that table and that bottle of water before you came into the room, so feel free to. All right, Joe.
You might walk the top with it though, so drink it.
I brought my own anyway.
Yep.
Try to plan ahead.
Good.
Once again, my name is Joe Novak, and, as I told the other candidates, thank you for throwing your hat into the ring. We appreciate that. And, before I ask my first question, I was looking at your people that, wrote letters on your behalf, and one of them was Sean Boyne.
Yes.
I think Sean was, one of our applicants that we discussed, so I think that was a nice touch on behalf of both.
He's been a very big supporter. He's
Yeah.
a very knowledgeable guy.
Yeah. Okay, this is, my question. I'm just gonna read it once. I usually read it twice, but sometimes it gets cumbersome, so I'll read it slowly so you can digest it. And it goes as follows. In light of the ongoing protests taking place throughout our nation and abroad regarding the death of George Floyd by overzealous law enforcement personnel, do you see policing tactics and racial stereotyping continuing? Will the powers that be relent, or will the same situation arise again? I ask this because there have been other racially charged and egregious actions undertaken by police officers, resulting in the unwarranted deaths of Black Americans. Still, nothing has transpired to curb these happenings. Please expound on your views and discuss how racial profiling can finally be put to rest. I strongly believe that all lives matter, regardless of the color of one's skin or any other attributes which one possesses. The world is big enough to accommodate everybody if the blinders are allowed to be removed.
First off, when I saw that on TV, especially being retired, that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my entire career. I've spent time in bigger departments, small towns. I have never in my entire career seen anything like that. That was hands down the most disgusting thing. And what's worse is he was the FTO of one of those gentlemen that was there. So, that's an internal problem that needs to be addressed for the department itself. How someone with that many complaints and that kind of attitude towards police work is training the next generation of officers. There's a major disconnect somewhere along the line. Whether they could get him out of there by the union or not, that's something they can control. There have been unnecessary deaths and abuses on minority communities as a whole. Most of that has gotten better over the years, you know, dating back to Rodney King, and even prior to that. I remember as a kid seeing the Rodney King beating taking place. Again, disgusting thing, and I was new to the job back then, you know, I was still working part-time. And I'm thinking to myself, is this what law enforcement is? It's not what I was raised as, it's not what I saw, it wasn't the respectful career I believed it was. There have been bumps in the right direction over the course of the years, but I can understand the frustration of the minority and Black communities because there is not enough, a bump doesn't cut it. You need to have some major progressive movements, some major moves forward to correct some of these things. Some of the same problems that existed in the beginning of my career are the same ones that exist now, you run into. They say there are problems, like Mr. Chauvin was, the union was too strong and they couldn't get him out of there. Well, that happens today in most departments. They say that that nepotism is an issue. You know, they're passing on some of the great candidates and they're hiring guys that, well, my uncle is a captain kind of thing. That's not how you hire people. I was raised, you always hire the most qualified for the position. Not who you know, it's what you know. It should never be who you know. They also don't recruit enough in the minority communities. I went to the academy with an African-American male who's a good friend of mine. We became friends in the academy. I worked with him in soccer for 10 years, and I still keep in touch with him now. There was a movement in the 90s and early 2000s where, after some of the events, they were looking to bump up numbers of officers from the minority communities. And their answer was to lower the standards. Their claim was that they're not getting the same educational benefits. They're carrying criminal charges, even misdemeanors, so they're allowing certain misdemeanors to be passed. They're allowing educational standards to be dropped, and that's where we run into a problem. He was upset with that. And he and I used to do a walking beat all the time at night. We used to walk in, it was a grant because we had open drug dealing when I first started there. So we would walk at night from 12 o'clock till 4 in the morning. We got to chat it up a lot. And he was disgusted by that. His big view on that was, everyone's telling us that, he goes, as an African-American, you're telling me that I'm stupid. I can't get the good grades. So you're gonna lower the standards and bring me through the door because I'm not smart enough. Dave was very smart. The gentleman has nothing to do with, he grew up in the housing project. He had to face some of the same issues that people face today. But he worked his way on. It has nothing to do with that. As long as you keep dropping the standards, if you're dropping the standards for that, you're also dropping it for everyone else. So we started bringing these knuckleheads through the door that, you know, my dad's a captain, and they just barely passed the test, so they've had drug usage in the last 6 months. When I was trying to become a cop, you made sure you didn't smoke pot, you didn't do anything, because I knew that's where I wanted to be. You know, I wanted to be a cop someday, and I knew you couldn't get on the job. If you said you smoked pot, or if you smoked pot, if you took a lie detector test and flunked it because of that, that's it, your job is done. Now they're allowing, some departments are allowing people on the job, well, you haven't used cocaine in the last 6 months. That's ridiculous. That's where your problem officers come from. Departments need to keep reaching out and having contact with the minority communities. We don't do a good enough job with it. My friend said, you know, also, he goes, what they were doing is trying to increase minority status in the department and saying, well, the department as a whole should reflect what the community is. Well, you also have to have a connection to the community. He would go back into the housing projects and it wasn't a problem, but there were other African Americans that were hired after him and they would put them in housing projects in those areas as their beats. Well, that's not fair to the officer because you're not allowing him the same rights as every other officer in the department because you're getting stuck in some of the worst areas. As you get farther on, you want the north end where it's a lot easier and you're handling parking tickets, you know, when you're 20 years on the job. But they're still not being accepted because they know darn well you're not from there. So you're no different. You know, even my buddy, we go into the project and he would have all kinds of names thrown at him that he was frustrated. It's a matter of just keep reaching out, getting out there and doing a better job of it. And the white officers need to get out there and do the same exact thing. It's about transparency, it's about accessibility. If you can get out there and let yourself know, say, listen, I'm Eric, this is who I am. Doing the gangs, I did that for most of my career in Woonsocket. Gang activity takes place in low-income areas. And unfortunately, due to socioeconomic problems, minorities make up a large percentage of the lower-income areas. I never once in my entire career had a complaint made against me because I treated everybody respectfully. I gave everyone a fair shot. I spoke to everybody like a human being and treated them like a human being because I expected the same thing back. Even when I arrested them, they weren't happy. I don't care what color you are, what background you are, what sex you are, you're never going to be happy when you're arrested. But during all that time, I never had one complaint filed against me for that. So I'm obviously doing something right, and I've always found it important to get out there and do that kind of thing. That's why I think, like I said, 33 years on the job, I think I have something to teach the younger group. It's not about going out there and writing X amount of tickets or putting up numbers. I think that's a big mistake departments make, is putting up stats. It becomes a competition. I don't care if you made 20 arrests, I want 20 good arrests. I'd rather have you make 2 good arrests and 18 positive contacts. And you've got to do that in all the communities. So we will get there eventually. I don't think the movement to defund everything right now is the answer. I think we need more training, not less training. If you take that money away, it's got to come out of something. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, it comes out of training budgets.
Okay, well, thank you, and I just want to make one comment that you brought up, and it's been a pet peeve of mine, that when we contract with our police department, we can't get them to have random drug checks. They just won't go for it, and I just always thought that that was wrong, because when you're in law enforcement, you should be abiding by the law. Not to say our officers are doing drugs, but it seems to me that if you weren't doing things that you weren't supposed to, be more than happy to say, well, yeah, I'll be happy to take a random drug test. But that's just my thought. So I wanted to bring that in because you had mentioned it.
Randoms are tough, but I looked through the contract, and your drug and alcohol policy in the contract is phenomenal. I was really impressed with that, because I've worked in departments where I've had, back when I was in Woonsocket, I had, one of my brother officers show up half in the bag.
Well,
I think that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Good. Identify and discuss your experience in creating, reviewing, and assessing law enforcement policy and procedure, agency directives, or general orders.
When I worked in Lincoln, I was one of the co-managers of the CALIA certification program for the department. Those not familiar with CALIA, it's standardized best practices accepted nationwide for police departments. It's a great program. It decreases liability for departments, gets everyone on the same page, makes sure that your people know the best thing to do in these certain situations. It cuts down on some of the racial overtones that you can find in policies at times. It cuts down on nepotism, misuse, all kinds of things. In the tools that you're using, carrying the tools we have is a great responsibility. And having policies for those tools, it's not easy to say I have a use of force policy and add in beanbag gun and taser and expandable baton and a handgun. You need to separate each one so everyone knows what you're going to use in what situation. Officers need to be able to think for themselves. You can't take that away from them, but they need to have some kind of guideline that Adams is using, that North Adams is using, that Pittsfield is using. So I think certification is good for any department. In Lincoln, I spent a lot of time doing that, and what we did is we went over our policies. The best practice for policy creation, once you have them, is to review them every 3 years, whether they need it or not. You take it out, you dust it off, you go through it from beginning to end. You go through every bit of it, make sure it meets the best standards of what's happening this year as opposed to 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago. Because things do change, and if it doesn't change, that's fine. You put it back in the box, and you put a date on it, and you revisit it again in 3 years. So 3 years is the timeline. But you pull it out, you compare it to what's being done, what the chiefs of police is putting out. They're changing things all the time. Okay, you need to look at this and change this. You also need to make sure it meets your state laws. Laws change all the time. The disorderly conduct charges I used to make 30 years ago in Rhode Island, I can guarantee you are worded a lot differently than they are now. So you need to make sure they're up to speed. Again, it reduces liability. So I spent a lot of time doing that. I would make the corrections, I would submit them, we would get them signed off on, and they'd go into the policy book. I was in the process of starting that in Egremont. Some of the policies were so old, the papers were different color. It's long overdue, and they were outdated. You read them and officers need to know what's expected of them. And if they don't have a policy for that, to show them how to do things, that certain things, they're not gonna understand that. Same thing with rules and regulations. I'm a big advocate for rules and regulations in a department besides the policies and procedures. One tells you how to do something, one tells you what needs to be done. You won't have a policy about wearing a uniform, but you might have a rule or regulation on what's to be worn, what's allowed on a uniform and what is not, how it's supposed to be worn. Where your car is supposed to be parked, that kind of thing. The policies usually deal with larger scale items, uses of force, defensive driving, high-speed pursuits, handling domestic violence calls, that kind of thing. So I think it's necessary. I spent a lot of time with both of those. I like rules and regulations. When I got to Egremont, that was one of the first things I did was push through it. It had already been looked at by the board. No one ever did anything with it, so I pushed it through. Since it was, they had a 5-day window to sign off on it, respond to it, they didn't, so I pushed it through. The guys weren't happy about it, but it's something to help guide them down the path and let them know what's expected of them. I think it's important to have both.
How much experience have you had working with a collective bargaining unit? What do you consider the essential elements of effective labor management relations?
The biggest thing is that both sides need to be heard. I've worked with, I hate to keep bringing it up, but that's my background. Some of the departments I've worked in the past, Rhode Island, Woonsocket had a fantastic policy, a very strong union. Unfortunately, it was too strong. There were officers that were protected that shouldn't have been. It happens all the time. It's not unique to that city or anywhere else. I never served on the board. I was a voting member. I never served on the board. I didn't write anything. I voted on things only. On the administrative end of it, that's what I live off of. Even when I worked in Vermont as a sergeant, I had to consult the contract and make sure my I's were dotted and my T's were crossed. And I didn't get called into the chief's office by the end of the week saying, what the heck were you doing? You're ordering this officer in, or you're telling this officer to do that and they can't do that. The contract says that. You need to be aware of it. So you need to take the time to understand it and figure out where they're coming from. I had asked for a copy of the one for Adams. Like I said, I think it's a fantastic document. It protects both sides. It is very well written. There's obviously strength to it, and unions have strength. There's nothing you can do about it. Unions are supposed to protect those that are being taken advantage of. Unfortunately, my experience over the years has been there's too much time invested in taking care of some of the bad officers, and some of the good ones kind of get lost in the shuffle. But like a Chauvin kind of officer, if you can't get rid of that officer and take him out of there regardless of what they've done, the department owns that problem. You know, Minneapolis, my understanding is the chief is pretty squared away. The department as a whole is pretty good. Obviously, there's some flaws if he's the FTO, but the department, an agency that big, there are going to be some holes. You plug as many as you can. But he shouldn't have been on the job. There's no doubt in my mind he shouldn't have been on the job. There was a shooting he was in years ago prior to that, which were questionable, you know, because you point a shotgun at me, I have a right to defend myself. So whether he was one of 5 involved or not, but some of the other things he was accused of were pretty serious, and he shouldn't have been there. You need to have something in place to take him out of there. Again, union strength is tough. It's tough.
Thank you.
What training and experience do you have in developing and implementing services and programs, courses, and/or learning objectives that incorporate diversity?
Well, a perfect example is one of the biggest things they did. I taught the introduction to gangs and intelligence at the academy. That was the course that we pushed through in legislation. I was the first instructor there. I created the program. You're dealing with minority communities, but 90% of what I taught involved minority communities. And I had 30 officers from around the state. Vermont's a predominantly white state, but I still had at least 20, 30% that were minorities, and you need to be able to have that conversation openly and freely and respectfully. I never once had a complaint from any of the minority officers in the group saying, listen, the way you're speaking about this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this. The references you're making. You can have conversations and open people's eyes to things. Some of these people, young officers, never left a town of 2,000 people, but they're gonna go work in Burlington. Burlington's a very diverse community. So, even though racism is very alive and well, unfortunately, and Vermont has more than a share of it, like I said, it's predominantly white. It's stuck in the past. They're coming around. Burlington's doing very well. Rutland's doing very well. Bennington's doing well, that kind of thing. But these officers want to become, you need to open their eyes to different things. Get them to understand that everybody's the same. I don't care what color you are, what sex you are, what religion you are. The person next to you is the one who probably saved your life, so you better get your head around this and learn how this works. It doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter what color they are. If someone's fighting with you, and this is the person that's going to jump in and help you, you probably should have been nice to them right along, because they don't care what you said to them. Just like the officers going out at the protest right now. They're getting screamed at. They're being called all kinds of things. And they're standing there with calm. I look at that and I'm infuriated being, watching it on TV. These officers are staying there nice and calm. They're doing what they have to do. They're being professional. Because they know there are problems, and these people have a right to be heard. No matter what the protest is about, whether it's related to race, whether it's related to amendment rights, whatever the case is, everyone in this country has the right to protest. Everyone in this country has the right to be heard. So that was one of the big things I took a lot of pride in with that gang class, is that I was able to open some young officers' minds, get them to understand we're all on the same page. And you better learn to get along with everybody, or you're not going to make it. I don't want people hesitating because I made a comment to them that was racist and upset them, and I'm getting my butt kicked, and they're looking at it saying, oh, maybe 5 more seconds before I jump in. They better learn how to deal with people. Excellent.
So Eric, just, my question is about budget. So just a frame of reference and some rough numbers. The police department's budget is about $1.8 million of the town's $16 million budget. So if you could just identify for us and discuss your budgeting experience, knowledge, and skill set.
Sure. Going back when I was the operations commander, I was involved in 2 budgets while I was there. I wrote both of them. I spent a lot of time in front of the Board of Selectmen negotiating some of the things we need. My chief at the time was from a much larger city, where when they ordered cars, they would order, as an example, they'd order 100 at a time. So when they did their budgets, they'd ask for 120. They only needed 100, and they would negotiate those 20 away and say, okay, I got to where I need to be. I got the 100 cars I need. That's cheesy. I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing. So when we were there, we needed 2 cars. We're a small department. We were 9 full-time, 3 part-time. We needed 2 new cars, and it was suggested that we had, I filled out the budget, and I had estimated at 2 new cars for the budget. That's what we need. And I was told to change that. Again, I don't agree with that. Every time I've done a budget, I've only asked for what I needed. There are a lot of things I want. There are a lot of really neat things out there, that would make everyone's life a lot easier. There's a lot of training out there that could expand an officer's career, but might not apply to the department. So why invest in that kind of training? It needs to, a search and rescue group, Pittsfield. Well, you're not on the side of a mountain, so it's really not gonna do any good in Pittsfield. So I've always been very big on asking for what I need only. I also did that in Egremont, and I came in halfway through my first year. I had half of what was left of a budget that was pretty established. We came in with a late submittal. I think it was $110 from the local dry cleaner that was never taken care of by the officers, so we were 110 over. But that was already in play for 7 months before I got there. And my final year, I came in under budget. So, not huge, you know, we're not gonna go buy new cars with that. But I kept an eye on it. Overtime budgets get eaten up fast, especially when you're short. Try to be creative. If you're allowed to use the contract you have in front of you, you can accomplish a lot of great things. The order in clause, I think is fantastic, as long as it's used. You know, I wasn't allowed to use that in Egremont, even though it was on the books. You give me a tool, I'm gonna use it. So, but that's, I've written 2 of them, New Hampshire, and I wrote the one in, Egremont.
Okay, this will be my final question. As a lifelong resident of Adams, I have witnessed the evolution of our police department. I vividly remember as a young man, the officers walking the streets and addressing you as you pass by, the nightly rounds to stores to check on their security, the writing of tickets for expired parking meters. In short, the Adams Police Department had a visible presence, and you knew who they were. Times have changed. They always do. No longer do the town's police officers walk the beat. They drive their cruisers to accomplish their tasks. No longer do they check stores after closing. Instead, they shine a spotlight on the business facade and move on. No longer do they write parking tickets for meter violations. We needed to add a town position to make this transaction. I must admit that I cannot put a name to a face of all of our police officers. What is your take on policing, which I term resident friendly?
It's funny that you say walking beats. When I started my career, I walked Main Street in Woonsocket. We did a 4 and 2 like you do here. I spent my first 2 days walking Main Street, with a partner, and it was great. You know, at first I'm like, geez, I want to get in the car, I want to get going, I want to get in the car chase, I want to go to the big calls. And we referred to them as dinosaurs. They were the guys on their way out. Said, no, slow it down a little bit, learn how to do this job properly. You know, learn who people are, learn what they're doing, when they're doing it, why they're doing it. And you'll get to know the community. So when you hear a bang in the alley at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know it's Mr. Smith opening up the coffee shop, because that's what he does at 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday, is open up his coffee shop. So I'm a big proponent of walking beats within reason, as long as I wouldn't dedicate one unless the department's big enough. And I don't think Adams is at that stage. You have a decent sized amount of manpower, but I don't think you have enough to dedicate a full-time walking beat. But I would expect officers to get out of the car and walk on a regular basis, and not just Main Street, because it's not just the businesses that are paying me bills. I walked with my buddy Dave during the grant money. I loved it. I walked around. I knew the back alleys and the houses and all the bars. I knew everything. There was a 10, 12 block area, and we knew every inch of that, and that's by walking around. And I think it's important. I would think some of the side streets that I was going through and taking a look, my wife and I were here on the motorcycle the other day, taking a look around. She loves it up here. The view is beautiful. In downtown, she likes the old look of it. But you need to get out there. You need to get out on some of these streets and walk around and have a conversation. We've gone to cars because numbers of officers have been cut back and volumes of calls have gone up. So you need to cut down. I mean, when I started, we used to bang out, each car would bang out 20 to 30 calls a night per car. One-man cars, that adds up. So you don't have a lot of time to get out of the car and walk.
Excuse me,
Sure.
when you said bang out, where were you talking
I'm
about?
sorry.
Woonsocket?
I'm sorry, yes, it was called the call.
Yeah.
So you need to complete them, and it was everything from, you know, quality of life issues, barking dog, my neighbor's music's too loud, to domestic assaults, robberies, shootings, whatnot. So you need to keep moving. Car's the one that's gonna get you there. But we still have time, you know, sometimes I think officers kid themselves that they're too busy. There are times you need to have some downtime and have a conversation with another officer. You know, we don't get coffee breaks, but when you see the car side by side and the 2 officers chatting, 5 minutes, drinking a coffee, having a conversation, decompress a little bit, I think that's great. When those same 2 cars are there, half hour, 45 minutes later, you obviously have time on your hands. So if that's the case, when you have this little time to get out and start doing some of these things. I'm all for the coffee and the conversation, especially as a supervisor. That's how you get to know your officers, and you can keep an eye on them. You don't get to see them at roll calls, to really talk to them. At the end of the day, they're running out the door. They want out. I did my 8 hours, and I don't have to do forced overtime, so I'm out of here. But you're not, as a supervisor, you have the responsibility to keep an eye on these officers, and make sure that PTSD is not becoming an issue, make sure their family life is okay. There were times guys that I was very close with, worked with, were separated, and I found out 3 months after they were separated. So obviously, if I'm a friend of theirs and I'm pretty tight and I don't know what's going on, my supervisor definitely didn't. But yeah, I do believe we need to get out in public and be seen. All communities, all times. Community policing over the years has always been, that's our way to meet the public. And I think you can ask 30 different police officers from 30 different departments what community policing means, and you will get a different answer every single time. I've seen a transition over the years from going into the housing projects and cooking hot dogs and hamburgers in your uniform and handing them out for free, and everybody eats your food and has your chips, and you have conversation for a half hour or so, and you pack up the grill and call it a night, and 20 minutes later, after you're done, you're back there because someone's shooting and assaulting. So you haven't made an impact. But I think if you're in these areas on a regular basis, if the public gets to know who you are, in the gang unit, everyone knew who I was. And even when I moved to New Hampshire, I was at the gas station, the Shell station, right on Main Street in Lincoln. And all of a sudden I hear Officer Eric. And it was this Asian male, a Laotian male that used to run around with LOC, with the street gang. His name was 8-Ball, and I turned around, he's in the car, and he's yelling at me, "What are you doing up here?" He didn't know I left, but he remembered me. I had been gone probably 3 months. Had no idea that I had left, but he saw me at a gas station in Lincoln, New Hampshire, 4 hours away, and said, I got to talk to him. I think that was pretty cool. I knew I made an impact, so you need to get out there, and I expect the officers to get out there.
Thank you very much.
The Adams Police Department works closely with the Adams Fire Department, the Adams Forest Wardens, EMS, Regional Emergency Management, and State Police, as well as community-based organizations. What has made you an effective collaborator in your current or past jobs?
I've always enjoyed talking to the other agencies. I hate going back all the time, but, the firehouse in the area I patrolled in Woonsocket, I was tight with the firemen there. I would stop and talk to them at the beginning of the shift and have a conversation. When Thanksgiving would come around, they'd cook Thanksgiving dinner, and I would have an open invitation, because I was a young guy, I'm working Thanksgiving one way or another, to go up and have dinner with them, and they welcomed me, and I could bring my family if I wanted. My kids loved it, because my oldest son used to volunteer fireman. He loved fire trucks since he was a little kid, so he thought it was the greatest thing. And Dad's working, Dad's a cop. Things are cool. But it was a great relationship with them, and I always did that because that's how you get things done, is having relationships with these other agencies. You can't ignore Public Works. Public Works says, hey, listen, can you give me a set of blue lights to, protect my guys for 15 minutes while we take care of this problem? You say no, or you drag your feet doing it, that's gonna come back to bite you, because all of a sudden you have a flood in the street and your officers are going call to call, and you need barricades. Public Works is gonna bring you the barricades, and if you say, listen, can you get some barricades out here? My guys are standing in the pouring rain, we need to move on to the next call. And they say, man, let me think about it. It doesn't work. You don't accomplish anything. It has to be one big team. We need to reach out beyond the town of Adams itself, the state police. Anytime you can get a state police cruiser or a cruiser from another agency, in Vermont, we have sheriff's departments that would come through, state police come through. Anytime you could get an extra car to come through to augment what you already have out there, that's a great day. That's a win. That's a free car. Because they're not going to drive by the accident, the assault, or whatnot. They're going to jump out and they're going to take care of the problem. And if it's yours, you take care of the accident when you get around to it. It's nice to have the extra manpower. It's nice to be able to serve the public the way they should be served. And they like seeing the extra cars too. If you have an agency where you have a lot of conflict with state or with the local sheriff's department or whatever the case may be, and they don't come to your town, that's noticeable. They pick up on that. Geez, I see them in Cheshire, I see them over in North Adams, I see them in Pittsfield. How come they never come to Adams? that speaks to the kind of department you have here, if that's the case. I don't see any problems with it. I've never heard anyone say anything, the time I've been here, say anything bad about Adam. They seem to work together well. The chief was a great guy. I met him a few times, had some nice conversations with him, and I think you really have a loss, you know, with him retiring. It's tough, like I said on the phone. I think he's gonna get 6 months into this and say, what the heck did I do? But, cause I miss it, you know, I could see him doing, he's that kind of cop. So, I think it's important to have these great relationships. And I'll tell you, the fire department, on the weekends, you go to the churches for the pancake breakfast. And you go to the fire departments in the afternoon for the steak fries. No one cooks a steak better than the fireman. I have always been to those. It's a great way to go. So it's important. And we look good. It's their event, but they see their officer there. They see their chief there. They see command staff there. So it's a win-win for everybody.
And thinking about the regional collaborative nature of the police chief position, what is your experience working with the district attorney's office?
I did work with Cassiavelli on an issue I had in Egremont, and he was fantastic. He was short-lived, but he was great to deal with. He had a solid head on his shoulders. He understood what you were asking of him. Never an issue if I had a question, obviously being new to the state, I've learned a lot of laws in a lot of states, and they were different everywhere. It was nice to be able to pick up the phone and have someone in his office, if not him himself. A lot of times, during the day, he would answer it himself if one of the CPAC troopers wasn't available. So he was fantastic to deal with. Working up in Vermont, the county attorney, they were in our office all the time. They're the ones that read our reports, prosecute our reports, and need to know what's going on with our reports. They can't stand in front of a judge with it's not even so much the spelling errors, it's, you know, probable cause left out, you know. So we were always open to that. They came and went, they had the key to the code to the back door and came and went as they pleased. You have to work closely with them, that's how you get things done, especially when you have your larger crimes. An unattended death is one thing, but when it's a murder, when it's a felony assault, it's nice to be able to pick up the phone and get them down there themselves. And a lot of times they will. I don't know how, I wasn't here long enough and I didn't deal with those kinds of crimes in Egremont. So I don't know if Cassiavelli would have come out at, 3 in the morning if I had a murder. Would like to think he would. But at the very least, he had a very strong CPAC group that I was confident with them coming out. But I think you need to work together just like with everyone else. They are the ultimate, law enforcement authority. They're the ones prosecuting, so. You need to have them in the pocket and move forward, get things done. If you argue with them, you're not going to make any progress.
The position of police chief requires a high degree of accountability. What does accountability mean to you in a legal sense with regard to data and metrics in terms of relations with the community?
If you're not making progress, it's going to show. If you're not addressing the needs, it's going to show. We've done CPAC, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I can't remember the term for it, but it's basically running statistics, being able to predict problems and problem areas based on calls in the past. We get times a day, so we're moving our groups into those areas. Say Thursday between 12 and 4 is a big problem for assaults or break-ins because the school's letting out and kids banging the schools, the homes on the way home. So we're able to predict that. It was a program that I wish, I'm drawing a blank because you didn't ask me, I would have been able to tell you. But it's a program that New York actually started years ago. It's a prediction model. If these things don't work, it's going to show and they're going to wonder why things aren't working. So accountability as a whole, from the accountability standpoint, everything I've ever done, I've stood up for. Anything my people have done under me, I've stood up for. If I told them that if they're off the rails doing their own thing, well, they're going to have to answer for themselves. But if I have a group of officers that I know are supposed to be walking the beat at night and they're not doing it, that's on me. Just because they don't want to do it means I'm not doing my job, making sure they get out there. So I take accountability for everything I'm involved in. And I've even taken accountability for some of my officers, because I think at times some of the things that are being picked on are minimal, so I would rather get yelled at by the lieutenant for 5 minutes than take the heat myself instead of my officer who's young and trying, and destroy them. I would rather build their confidence and build them as an officer, as long as it's nothing serious. But, you know, I have broad shoulders. I've been called everything in the book over my career. I can handle 5 minutes of screaming.
So, Eric, we've been talking for, just about an hour, right? Or, yeah. So I wanted to just ask you if there's anything that you wanted to share with us that maybe we didn't ask you directly, and you wanted to make sure that you didn't leave this room without sharing that piece of information with us or experience that you might have. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
No, I'm an open book. I have a habit of talking too much. I'm sure some of my answers are long-winded. This is who I am. I don't pretend to be who I'm not. So whatever questions you've asked, I've answered 110%. If you have any others, I'll be more than happy to answer them at any time. I figure I'm straightforward. I am not always approachable, but, you know, it's big, bold, 6'3". I have a habit, unfortunately, of bothering people and intimidating kids, but I consider myself an outgoing person. I'll talk to anybody, anytime. So if you have any questions after this, feel free to, you know, send them to me. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Give me a call. I don't care if you have my phone number. I think this is a great opportunity. It's something I'd like to pursue. Like I said, I went out the door and I thought well, my wife said, let's give her time and a try. 1 month into it, I knew I was in over my head, especially when it started snowing and I put the bike away, because it was my hobby. You know, I had no more riding. So it's definitely time for me to get back into it and see what I do. Mass has a mandatory retirement at 65, so I'd like to think I can do another 10 standing on my head. The goal was originally to do 40 years. I kind of got soured at the last place, so I had 33 could have been the cutoff, but I'd like to do another 10. So this is an interim. I also put in for the full-time spot, so I figured this would be a good stepping stone, at least an opportunity for you to get to know me to get to know what the town is, and you folks and what you expect of me. Kind of kick the tires a little bit on both ends, both parties, and see where it goes. If not, at the very least, I get to be part of helping another community along for a 6-month period. And I guess it's up to 6 months, so it could be shorter, but whatever the period may be, it's an opportunity for me to maybe help some younger officers and be involved in the community.
Do you have any questions of us?
One question I would have is, as an interim chief, is this just a filler position, to just kind of hold down the fort until you do get the full-time officer, chief in place, or is this something where you're looking for the chief to be interactive, proactive, new programs, whatever the case may be? Because obviously if whoever gets it and doesn't get the full-time spot, walks away after 5 months and they start a program, that program usually will fail, because it needs to be fed. Programs do.
So, I'll start to address that, and I will also let the town administrator chime in, and other board members. It would be, management of some administrative, tasks that are before the police chief, to help us through this time period. But I believe that the position would be as what a full-time police chief would be. I mean, you'd be working full-time. So if there's an initiative, that hasn't been over in the department and doesn't cost anything, because I'll throw that out there, it's a very lean budget. I'm sure working with the town administrator, you'd be able to present something to the Board of Selectmen to implement. So I guess I was very careful with the way I answered this, but I don't know, Dave, if you would want to add anything.
I'll throw it right at you, Chief. I need a command staff assessment. I need to rebuild the command staff. We're going to need an assessment of the skill set of our younger officers, but particularly looking at our shifts and mentorship. The department is incredibly young, and we need some stability stability over there. We need some mentorship, and we need to rebuild that command staff. We need somebody to go in there and just take a look behind the curtain, see what's going on, see where the problems are, see what's being done well, see where we need to improve, and go from there. It's not a babysitting position. You'll have full disciplinary authority, full working with me, change policy, procedure, updates, whatever needs to be done, like, start to get the department on a roadmap to stability and to, continue to make it the best department in Berkshire County.
Okay.
You'll be busy.
That was my concern, is that, you know, if it was just a filler position, I don't think it's really gonna help anybody, no matter who you pick and how long of a period of time it is. Some departments, some towns have done that over the past. I just need someone for 3 months to run the show and do some paperwork and sign the paperwork. I know a lot of your command staff has already left. Your lieutenant is retired, your senior sergeant just retired.
Yeah. We have one sergeant, very experienced, and then the next sergeant behind that, a lot of potential, strong, but still on the young side. And then from there, incredibly young part. We have some excellent instructors, some great skill sets. But we've got it, I would look at it, Chief, as almost 6 months of a consulting position. You take a good snapshot at it and get us to rebuild some of that. You'll probably be engaged with a sergeant's assessment, this is the tradition in our CDA. We started with Wayne Brown, or Wayne Sampson, excuse me.
Yep.
To do a sergeant's assessment. We've got to look at whether or not we should use the lieutenant model or sergeant model. So we've got some of that rebuild. The department is stable, it's functioning, but we do have some manpower concerns over there, so we should have stabilize it as well as the attrition.
Yeah, I think you have a great organization over there. You know, except the chief, the conversation I had with the chief were great. He knows his stuff, the things he was putting in place and discussions we had. He was dotting all the I's. You're very well funded. The officers don't seem to want for anything. Well, I shouldn't say that every officer wants. There's always something, but as far as the department goes, you're very well equipped. Your facility is very strong. That's huge. Losing your command staff, I think that's fixable. It's just a matter of taking the time and, you know, not jumping. Sometimes people jump and they say, well, I need a lieutenant now. You need a lieutenant who can do the job. You just don't grab someone and throw them into that position. So I think that's great. I think whoever comes in has a lot to work with. I see success, and you're on track for what you just said. So not that you needed to hear that from me.
No.
Listen to it. You have a plan, which is nice. Plans are always nice, and you're definitely on point with that. So.
And to clarify, we went forward with an interim position. Chief Tarsa had provided us with a 6-month notice of his retirement. We are doing our best to honor his wishes. He's staying a little bit longer to help us out. COVID kind of threw a curveball at all of us. We had a process that we started in February with a screening committee, and I know that you were part of that pool of applicants. But we just felt like we couldn't do a thorough public process that we wanted to have a few candidates meet members of the community and members of the public face to face, and we felt that an interim position would give us some time to allow us to have that process the way that we had envisioned it from day one. And so this gives us time, but it also allows the interim candidate to apply for that as well. So I just wanted to clarify that's why we've gone this route.
I should also add too, we're going to probably have the interim chief certainly take a policy review, take a look at our policies, see what we have, be updated, and give us a good snapshot of where we stand with that.
Have you folks looked at certification or accreditation?
I have not had that conversation with the chief.
I'm a big fan of accreditation. Mass is nice because you have a 2-step process. You have the certification first, brings you 2/3 of the way there. State accreditation, which dots all the I's, crosses the T's, reduces your liability, cuts down on your insurance. Gets everyone on the same page. I'm a strong advocate for that, so regardless of what happens here, take it for what it's worth. I would definitely go down that road. It can be expensive at times. You're depending on, everything from your impound lot, well, is it just a place where you park the cars? Well, now it needs to be fenced in. So you're gonna spend a little bit of money here and there. But the savings in the long run, not to mention, you don't end up, or you have a less of a chance of ending up with a Chauvin. So he's gonna cost Minneapolis a lot of money. And I'd rather spend $2,000 on a new fence or a little thing here or there, than have the insurance company cut a check for $2 million, if not more. But just take it for what it's worth. I'm a big proponent for that, so it's never a bad thing.
Anything else? Or anything else from anyone? Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and as we talked on Monday, we are moving through the process relatively quickly. We do hope to be in touch with each of the candidates next week to just share what steps are next.
Okay.
Okay? So
Great.
it's kind of our timing at this point. All right.
I
Well,
would
thank
shake hands, but have a COVID day.
Yes. Feel free to take a bottle of water if you would like.
No, I'm good. I've got this
Okay.
in my mask.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you. So our next candidate is scheduled for 7:15. See you about another minute.
Hello?
Hi there. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let me just check and make sure everything's working on this end. And John, pre-COVID, I think we all would have stood, shook your hand.
Yes.
It would have been wonderful. But we still welcome you, regardless of the lack of handshake. When we spoke on the phone on Monday, I did tell you that this is a public meeting.
Correct.
We do have an open line to the public right now. I will tell you, we have 3 people who've called in. One is our town council, so legal's on the phone. Our administrative assistant is on the phone. She's helping us with minutes.
Okay.
And we have a member of the public, Donna McDonald, who actually is also our assessor.
Great.
So some interested parties on the line. If anybody else should join us, I will make sure that I let you know that another person has entered the room, just as I like to keep everybody here in the physical space know who's on the call.
Sure.
I don't like to have surprises for people. It is being recorded, so I wanted to let you know that as well. And as my colleagues have already heard me apologize to the other candidates, I apologize up front if it seems rude that I'm looking at the computer screen, but I'm just trying to manage the technological issues that may come up. I'm hoping that with the speakerphone closer to you, people on the call will hear.
Okay. I'll try to speak loud enough.
Yeah, we have the windows open for a little bit of a cross breeze.
Sure.
But we do have some trucks that are going by that's making it a little difficult for those who are listening on the call. With that, again, my name is Christine Hoyt, so it's nice to see you in person, even though we spoke on Monday. And I just wanted to go around the room and have everyone just say their name, even though our nameplates are in front of us.
Hi, my name's Joe Novak, and nice to meet you, John.
Hi, Joe.
Rick Blanchard,
Hi, Rick.
Jim Bush, Vice Chairman,
Jim.
John Duval,
Hi, John.
Jay Green.
Okay, so that's all of us. Now we're going to get to know you. We do have a set of questions that we're asking each of the candidates, and we hope to get through that in a period of time where at the end we can leave it up to you to ask us some questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and get us started. Just tell us, generally speaking, how does your professional experience and your skill set line up with the duties and responsibilities of the police chief for the town of Adams, and what specifically makes you the right fit for our community?
Sure. So everybody that's on the Zoom call, I'm John Measham. So I've been in law enforcement for 29 years. I currently hold the rank of Master Sergeant with the Connecticut State Police, which makes me the Executive Officer of Troop E Montville, which is in southeastern Connecticut. That covers a big corner of the state, so it's a mix of what we call resident trooper towns, and that's kind of a unique program to Connecticut, so I'd kind of just like to give you some background on that. The state police provide dedicated troopers, sometimes it's more than one, sometimes it's one. It can also be a mix of troopers that are supervising town officers. It's really up to the town, and I've been heavily involved in that aspect of things through my career. And so right now, my daily duties are, I have about 37 troopers on patrol. We have about 6 resident troopers, 2 clerks, 4 dispatchers, 4 sergeant and a resident sergeant, and troop mechanic, and then my boss. So it falls on me to schedule everybody across the board. That's a big part of my job. So I have to take care of holidays, vacations, anything that pops up, civil unrest with people closing the highways. You know, we have to get people into work in short notice. That's what I do right now. I'm also involved in the facilities aspect. I like to say I keep the lights on and I keep the wheels on the car. So I'm also involved with, you know, vehicle assignments, maintaining spare vehicles, really making sure that the day-to-day operations keep going. I've been deemed a subject matter expert in my position because they're gearing up for another promotional procedure. So I'm helping with some of the screening and questions on that. I've also done that as a resident trooper sergeant. So a lot of times I'm on the other side of this interview where we have troopers come in that want to go to positions, and really it's up to me to come up with the scoring matrix and coordinate with HR and get the panel in. We have to do the whole scoring thing and affirmative action and equal opportunity and all that jazz to make it all on the up and up. I think my administrative side really has put me in a good place to be a chief, because a lot of that is relevant to any administrative functions in a police department. I also draw upon my experience as a resident. I was a resident trooper in the town of Essex. And really, you know, again, that resident trooper program is modeled for how the town wants it, and the town really treats the resident trooper as a head of a department. There's usually 4 to 6 full and part-time officers in that town that I would supervise. We had a Marine Patrol boat, we had Marine Patrol officers, which was a great aspect to be involved with, because I love being on the water. The K-9 officer, and then, you know, our budget was around, you know, just upwards of $300,000. So, you know, I had the experience of, it fell on me to actually prepare the budget for the town, even though I wasn't a town employee, because they treated me like a head of that department. So I have experience in that. I had to, you know, write the section for the town report. I had to, you know, purchase a vehicle during that time. I had 2 hiring processes that I oversaw for that town, which I think gives me some good insight into there's state requirements that have to get followed to go through that, through the Police Officers and Standards and Training Council. So I think, you know, that helps me fit into the job of a chief, because there's certainly, I think you're gearing up for a hiring process. So that's something I'm very familiar with and would be comfortable with if that fell on me to help out. I think the other thing that prepares me for a chief is I don't only do, operations on the administrative side. I'm still eligible to work overtime as a sergeant, which is, can be very beneficial. So that keeps me on the front line side when I want. I certainly did a lot of frontline supervision, so critical incidents, serious and fatal accidents, burglary investigations, sexual assaults. We have detectives with the state police, obviously, but the way we run, the way we're structured, we really investigate a lot of crimes that would normally go to a detective fall on a trooper or a lot of times a resident trooper because they have a little more flexibility in what they're doing on their day. So I think investigatory experience-wise, I'm probably have more experience than some might have coming in here. We have a accident reconstruction team, but they don't always get called out, so it falls on us. It depends on the circumstances. It's more frequent now, but back when I was strictly on the road and a resident trooper sergeant, we had to take out tape measures and roll tape and get it all done ourselves. So I think the other thing that would fit well with being a police chief, especially in this town. So yeah, I know you're asking me about this town. You have about 85,000 population, about 23 square miles. That's right in my wheelhouse. That's very similar to the towns that I've worked in. I was a resident trooper sergeant in Troop Pass in Westbrook, which is a shoreline town. Same thing. We had I had 4 of the larger towns with constabularies. There was 5 more that my counterpart had, and then I was a liaison for one town that just chose to have generalized police services. And in order to do that well, I really needed to interface and deal with Board of Selectmen, not only Board of Selectmen, but I know you have a town manager. Where we are, the first selectman is the full-time in the office all the time. So, I really built my relationships with those folks because, especially in a constabulary where the town, we say constabulary, it's not really a constabulary anymore. Some people will be mad at me for saying that. They're town officers, so they're certified municipal town officers that are being supervised by a resident trooper, which are being supervised by me at the time. So, things would go sideways. There could be issues, and it was really up to me to smooth that out because it can be a tricky kind of thing to supervise officers that aren't employed by you, they're employed by the town. So, when you want to get things done and be on the same page, you really need to fall back on that relationship with the selectmen, to come in and say, listen, this is what's going on, this is what we see, this is what we want to do. And, if you don't have that relationship, I've had selectmen come out and say, well, I feel it's my job to protect the officers from the state. And I'm like, time out. There's no us them going on here. We're all on the same team. Let's find some common ground. We need to make some changes, and this is why. And I got to the point where they would really listen to me, and we would find that common ground and come up with solutions for different things going on. So I think that kind of goes to my leadership style, which you're probably interested in, and goes again to my ability to be here. My leadership style depends upon what the situation is and who I'm dealing with. So if we're on a hot call, we have a critical incident kind of thing going on, I'm going to be very directive. Okay, I'm going to be very directed, and I'm just going to fall back on my Marine Corps training and tell people where to go and how to do it, because that's what we need at that time. If it's, it can be a fatal motor vehicle accident or a serious motor vehicle accident, the highway's closed down, I'm going to be somewhat directive. I might gather up everybody at the scene and say, okay, I need somebody to do photos, who wants to do photos? I need somebody to do the math, who wants to do the math? Okay, who's gonna fill out the numbers? And, you know, let the troopers decide who's gonna do what. That's fine with me. Part of that is really knowing your troopers and their ability. So, you know, as a leader, I wanna know what their ability is, because if somebody that is terrible at reading the tape measure says, oh, I'll do the measurements, you know, or whatever, just as an example, that I'm gonna say, you know, hang on, let's have somebody else do it. You know, in a nice way, I'm not gonna draw attention to it, but we're gonna say, no, I'd rather have, you know, this trooper do it, and you do the photos, you know, that kind of thing. That also goes to, you know, when an investigation comes in. Okay, with the seriousness of the investigation, are we gonna keep it with that specific trooper, or are we gonna ask criminal investigations, the detectives to take it? So you have to know the investigators' you know, ability. I had some top-notch resident troopers that could take anything and just run with it, and would probably do a better job than, no offense, but, you know, just as well, if not better, than passing it off to a detective. I know you have, the website's up to date. You have 10 officers, 2 sergeants, 3 dispatchers, animal control officer. So again, that's that I'm used to dealing with now in a lot of ways, and it's right in line with what I used to do. So as resident trooper sergeant again in Westbrook, or in Troop F in Westbrook, we had the towns of Westbrook, Old Lyme, Deep River, Essex, and between the resident troopers, there could be, I got back to 2, but there used to be 3 in Westbrook. Each other, there could be a seasonal trooper and Old Lyme in addition to the resident trooper. So all told, I'd have about 20 or so that I would have to directly or indirectly deal with. So the resident troopers are doing a lot of the daily stuff in the town, but because I'm not a dedicated resident trooper sergeant to a town, all those reports would be funneling into me.
I did want to correct, I don't think the website was up to date with the staffing.
Okay.
We actually do not have dispatcher, over in the police department, so we do not have the 2 dispatchers. 2 sergeants.
12 patrolmen, 1 detective, currently 2 sergeants. We had a lieutenant who's retired and a senior sergeant.
How many reserves? Is it 2?
Right now, 2.
Okay.
That's the makeup of the department, and 1 administrative assistant and an animal control officer who is a full-time position, but it's split between animal control and parking.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to make.
I like multitasking.
Well, good. So we'll go on to the next question, but
Sure.
before we do so, I just wanted to let you know there was another member of the public who did sign on. Her name is Rena, and she's also on. So we have 2 members of the public and legal and admin. Joe.
Okay, as I mentioned to each candidate, thank you very much for showing interest in this position, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
So, my question is as follows. In light of the ongoing protests taking place throughout our nation and abroad regarding the death of George Floyd by overzealous law enforcement personnel, do you see policing tactics and racial stereotyping continuing? Will the powers that be relent, or will the same situation arise again? I ask this because there have been other racially charged and egregious actions undertaken by police officers, resulting in the unwanted deaths of Black Americans. Still, nothing has transpired to curb these happenings. Please expound on your views and discuss how racial profiling can finally be put to rest. I strongly believe that all lives matter, regardless of the color of one's skin or any other attribute which one possesses. The world is big enough to accommodate everyone if the blinders are allowed to be removed.
Sure. So that was a lot to take in. So in Connecticut, we have a very, we live by a very, pretty strict racial profiling, law that was enacted. So every motor vehicle stop that transpires, we have MDTs in most of our cars, mobile data terminals. So, whether it's cleared by the officer or if it's cleared, at dispatch, there's a whole host of, racial and ethnic, and gender questions that have to be answered to satisfy the legislation that was passed, in Connecticut. And we've been living with that for a number of years, so it's not anything new. So it would be, age, race, gender, if there's an ethnicity involved, the duration of the stop, was the vehicle searched, was the vehicle towed. So, that, if there's, and that's submitted to the state legislature every year by statute, and there's been certain towns, none that, thankfully, that I've been involved with, not in my troop area even, but there's been some municipal towns that were flagged after looking at the statistics. So, and once they were flagged, there was some harder look at what was, was it really racial profiling? Were there other factors involved? And, what needed to be done with that? I'm a fan of data. I like looking at data, especially when the town has issues with like speeding or something, and we have a speed recorder and detecting device going up, or burglaries. Why are the burglaries up? Burglaries are usually associated with drugs. Okay, so do we have an emerging drug problem? As far as race, there's about 1 million police in the country that are performing over 375 million interactions a year, and the majority of those interactions are positive. They're not on the news. We're taking a terrible hit culturally, and certain things absolutely need to change. Okay, but every police agency, including Adams, is going to have their own personality, group personality, and they're going to have somewhat of their own culture. Okay, just like you can't paint a racial or ethnic group with the same broad brush, you really can't paint police with a broad brush. So what we can do is, as a chief, and as any other chief, I hope, would ensure that there's stopgaps in place to ensure that there's no red flags like those high racial profiling stops. And if there is, okay, who is it, and what's going on, and what can we change? If there's a culture that is promoting any kind of racial bias or prejudice, then that's just got to be confronted and stopped. I would be remiss if I thought that somehow I was completely colorblind, just like everyone else is. Okay, we all have some inherent bias or some prejudice, and the key there is to really challenge yourself when you see something, and run through your mind, okay, why am I keying in on this? Am I keying in on what's happening, or am I keying in on a racial or ethnic makeup? If you're really honest with yourself, there's things in the news every day. The Central Park wig out. That was terrible. We can't say that we're all colorblind and then things like that happen. I don't know the officers in Minneapolis. It disgusted me. I know it disgusted my counterparts. It disgusted my coworkers. From dispatchers to dog handlers. I would hope that would never happen anywhere that I worked. And I would almost suspect that when you look at it, I would suspect that officer's had problems in the past. I suspect he's been disciplined in the past. I think he has. And if you really started talking to people, you might find that there was things that were never documented or never really confronted and disciplined. And that's a problem. That's a culture problem. You know, especially as a supervisor, you need to confront those things, and they need to be documented, and then there needs to be steps taken to remediate that. You know, if you're in law enforcement long enough, are you going to be in a situation where somebody, you know, you're seeing somebody that might be starting to get heavy-handed? Yeah, I've been doing this for 29 years. As a trooper, as a sergeant, you step in and you go, okay, that's enough, knock it off, you know, put the cuffs on, get them in the car, or, you know, what have you, we're done here, you know? And that's why I am definitely more disappointed, if not disgusted, at the backup officers, because they failed as backup officers. They failed, you know, we call them wingmen sometimes. They failed because they failed that officer that was kneeling on George Floyd. All it would take is one of them to say, okay, enough, sit him up. He's you know, we're done. Wait for the ambulance. Let him sit up. It would have been that simple, and it would have never been on the news. You know, we wouldn't be talking about this. But I also suspect that because that officer's probably had issues, and it's already coming out that he's had issues, and it's terrible. I would suspect that he would have been doing that to anybody, regardless of their race. That's just my guess. That's my feeling, because I just think that, you know, he's probably the guy that, you know, through your career, you hear, oh yeah, you hear him on the radio saying he's going to come back you up, and you're like, oh, no, just stay away, you know. But, you know, there's certain people that, you know, you get everything calm, and then they show up, and all of a sudden it's not calm anymore. And that's, you know, that's a conversation. You know, that's, you know, a lot of that can be handled officer to officer, trooper to trooper to say, listen, you need to knock it off.
Thank you very much. I'm not trying to cut you
Sure.
off, but we've got
Yes,
a lot
I
of
understand.
questions, and thank you for your thorough answer.
Okay, if you would, identify and discuss your experience in creating, reviewing, assessing law enforcement policy and procedure, agency directives, or general orders.
Sure. So we're a big part of that, where that comes into play. If we receive a complaint, we have a pretty extensive complaint system that allows citizens to make complaints either in person, in writing, or over the internet. So depending on what the accusation is, a lot of those times, because our internal affairs is not very big, because we're facing manpower shortages just like everybody else, a lot of that gets sent down to a supervisor like myself to investigate. So I'm pretty comfortable with doing investigations of personnel. It comes with the job. And, you know, we can do things like look at body camera footage, we can look at mobile video recorder footage. You know, there might be recorded telephone conversations that come into play. You're going to interview witnesses, interview the complainant, take written statements. We can get an explanatory memorandum from the trooper officer involved. So that's, you know, and then I'm gonna take that and say, okay, well, were these administrative and operation rules and guidelines violated? Hopefully we don't get to that. You know, like use of force, we're automatically gonna do a review use of force by the supervisor every time we go beyond handcuffing anybody. I think that's a very good policy, and we look at what happened to make sure that it was in compliance with policy. So, you know, when we say sometimes bad guys get broke, they do. It doesn't mean an officer or trooper did anything wrong. It means that that was the level of force they needed to overcome resistance. That's really what it comes down to. You know, I work in a pretty big agency. I don't get to write policy. I have to live by policy. I'm sorry, were you interested in programs at all, or?
No, basically, I was interested in writing policy.
Okay. writing policy would be more like, daily memorandums, like, with the COVID, things, I had to put out some, barrack-specific, policy about people entering and using the thermometer and infrared thermometer and things like that. As a resident trooper, I had to write, some policy about, use of vehicles or town-specific things that, weren't really covered in the Administration Operations Manual because it's a lot smaller for the town than, the overall agency.
How much experience have you had working with collective bargaining unit? And what do you consider the essential elements of effective labor management relations?
Sure. So I started my career in the town of Guilford, which is a shoreline community. I was a patrolman there for 9 years, and during that time, I was the vice president and later the president of the local police union there. So I did help negotiate 2 contracts during that time, and I had to represent other officers and grievances, and I also went and participated in unfair labor practices. So I feel I'm pretty well versed in some of the differences between grievances and unfair labor practices, and in retrospect, I really didn't love that job. If there's a lot of grievances filed, I think that's just an indication of there's that atmosphere going on. My time with the state police, I think I've had, I'm just aware of maybe two grievances in the last 20 years that didn't involve me, just in general at the barracks. Because I'm responsible for the fair and equitable distribution of overtime, and we have kind of an antiquated card system for cards for overtime, and there's a lot of ins and outs and some minuscule rules. Even if it's not me, if it's a sergeant doing it, mistakes happen, so people get passed over. That's the biggest gripe that we have. I have a good relationship with the each barracks has a union rep and steward, and sometimes they'll come in and say, hey, this is somebody says they got passed over, or the trooper themselves will call me and say they got passed over, and you will work something out. I think open communication and being reasonable can go a long way in management labor relations. There are times when a steward might come up to me and say, oh, hey, we'll kind of have a complaint that has nothing to do with the contract. And that's really kind of my, that's kind of my cutoff a lot of times, where I say, this has nothing to do, but, in that good faith common ground, yeah, I'll try to get so-and-so a new car or whatever. I mean, we only have so many new cars coming out, something like that. But, yeah, I just try to keep any formal need for a grievance at a bare minimum. I mean, I just try to eliminate it. I mean, it's just, there's really the atmosphere where we are now and the morale, it just doesn't really happen very often because we keep that.
What training and experience do you have in developing and implementing services and programs, courses, and/or learning objectives that incorporate diversity?
We try to be open and have programs, so I've spent a fair amount of time. We have 2 regional school systems that I've traditionally dealt with in the past as a resident trooper sergeant. So we try to be as diverse as the schools in the community. I developed a program so that the schools were concerned with school violence. So what I did is I got together with the superintendents, and we would have roll call at the schools before school started. So if it was an elementary school, we could come in early because they usually kicked off at 9. We'd have roll call at 7. We'd bring everybody in so that they would get familiarized with the school. So if something did happen, it's not the first time that they're coming into this building. And also, if you're in a lockdown, that means we're locked out. So we had to, arrange different ways So that happened at a lot of different schools at a lot of different times. So like the high schools, I think we did closer to the summer months so that we didn't have to worry about it because they had an earlier start time. I get a lot of calls from our PIO office, so that's our public information office, and they have events where they want specific troopers to go to, so I'm always working with that so that we can help with diversity and putting out the message and image that they want. Prior to being in Montville, I was at the other end of the state in Bridgeport, which is a very expansive patrol area, so we're putting about 10 troopers a shift there. But that end of the state was more diverse, so our troopers were more diverse. And again, with tight budgets and lessening personnel, I got down there and I didn't like the way the barracks looked. I drove in, there were some units working out of that barracks, and they had undercover cars, or they called them undercover cars, but the tires were going flat on a lot of them, and I thought it looked like a used car lot. So I always try to make anywhere that I'm assigned better than what I got there. So we had a massive cleanup of the parking lot. We paved all the, we paved the potholes. We got the wrecks that had to be there moved. We got rid of some other cars, and we were left with a terrible looking front of the building. So I found a nonprofit group in the community that had a program for teens that designed landscape design, and then they would implement actually putting it in. So I contacted them, I worked with them, and got them to beautify the front of the building. I thought that was, I think that was good because we were bringing in the community and working with the community, and really they just asked us for the ability to do some ride-alongs with anyone that was in that group that was interested, which is absolutely, we're, I love ride-alongs. Ride-alongs are great. We get people all the time that are like college students that are looking to do law enforcement. We sign them up, we do a quick background check, and they can come in and do a ride-along whenever they want. Have interns come in. That helps us out and diversifies us with coming from local colleges, come in and do ride-alongs and see which, I get calls from a former coworker who's a chief in a nearby town, and he says, hey, I have a current intern, she's doing some work here, she's done ride-alongs with us, can you accommodate her? Absolutely, let's get her over here. Yep. So that's probably the most diversified programs that I could tell you I've been involved with.
Are your officers required to take diversity training, or have you been part of programs that get out to the communities, diverse communities, training for your officers in that area?
Sure. I've undergone a couple of different instances of diversity training. There's blocks of diversity training when you're at the academy, and it's been probably intermittent throughout my time with the state police. When I was at the State Police Academy, one of the things that my class undertook was going to Willimantic had like low-income community type housing complex that was pretty drug rampant. There's a lot of problems there, and we went in with the community and we built playgrounds for that community, and I think it was very impactful for a lot of the kids that were there. There was a lot of interaction, and we had a good interaction with them, so that's something that I always remember. Just on a personal level, I've tried to be aware of diversity and do diverse things. My extended family is multiracial, so again, going back to the whole nobody's colorblind, I think I'm a little more sensitive to things that happen or perceptions that you can see people bring across. I sent my children on a church mission to Haiti, which was pretty life-altering. My daughter went down there and came back and said, I want to be a nurse. So she's in a nursing program, Sacred Heart, playing D1 lacrosse at the same time. My same kind of almost impact with my son, who's, he's in the Marine Corps, but still, my time in the Marine Corps, we never said black, white, yellow, anything. It was, you were dark green or light green. And, I served with people from not only all over the country, but all extremely diverse socioeconomic, everything from, I had a great roommate who was a track scholarship athlete from Indiana to, a coal miner's son from Ohio. So it really, you get, I think when you're living with everybody like that, realize that we're all the same. We're more the same than we are different.
John, this question is about budgeting. I know that you mentioned in the overview that you've had some town budget experience, so I'm going to ask you to expound upon that. The police department's budget is approximately $1.8 million of our $16 million town budget. So if you could identify and discuss your budgeting experience, knowledge, and skills that you would bring to this job.
Sure. So I had to prepare the town budget for Essex. So my strategy in that was taking the current budget and comparing, going through that and seeing if there was anything unnecessary that could be eliminated, and then looking at, did we fall short? Do we have a surplus? If we fell short, why? If we have a surplus, why? At the time, we were down one officer, so his salary was offsetting any overtime costs. So, even though line item wise we were above overtime overall, we were fine. You got to start. I think you have to start with the basics. You have to start with what you need. So you need your salaries. Okay, is there a collective bargaining raise that we have to account for? That's going to be the next. And then you start looking at capital things like, okay, we have 5 cars. One that 100,000 miles. Are we going to ask for another car? And then I think you just go down the line there and you look at other items on there, and if it's I like truth in advertising. So I never tried to pad a budget because it's like, oh well, maybe they won't notice this, so I'm going to leave it in even though we haven't used this line item in the last 2 years. It's we'll use it later on. I just think that's disingenuous, and it's more of a game, and I've dealt with the other people with budgets, and they have the the use it or lose it mentality when you're coming up in June, and if it's something that you actually need, that's fine. That maybe got overlooked. I had the ability to go and get permission to say, okay, well, I'm not using this over here, but we have that huge walk-in closet off the garage, and the guys are using it for a locker room, and it's really, it's really terrible. I can get these new stadium lockers, 1 locker for every officer, and things like that, simple things can just really increase morale, and that's why I focus on facilities, because if you're walking into a barracks or a police department that half the lights aren't working, or the grass isn't cut, or there's file cabinets that nobody's using stacked up in the corner or in the hallway, it's like a broken window theory. If it doesn't look good, you're not going to feel good. You don't feel good, you're not going to produce. So everywhere I've gone, that's part of me trying to make a barracks or where I work better, where I've, okay, I have to call a fleet, get a truck over here, I get round up some guys, my admin guy, and, we come in cities and we start loading up, nobody uses file cabinets. I don't know about you guys, but nobody uses file cabinets anymore. So, every barracks or every police department has this room where all this stuff is stacking up. And, because nobody gets rid of it, so I've become the guy that gets rid of it. So I have to coordinate with fleet, get the truck, I have to call up asset management, I have to fill out this huge form, I have to record all the little numbers that are on the tags, and finally get rid of that. And then people come to work and they're like, wow, like, I've never seen this before. There was a seized, and seized cars are like that too. I have an evidence officer, so I'm always after them, like, can we get rid of anything? There's no room in the impound, like, what can we get rid of? There was a trailer there for like forever. That was just like, what is with this trailer? Well, it's been there for like 12 years. Well, it's time to make it go away, So I just think that adds to morale at a time when it's kind of tough to feel good about our profession, even though we're the ones coming in and doing the right things. We're just taking such a kick in the teeth right now that, that's what I like to do.
Thank you very much.
Okay, here I am again. As a lifelong resident of Adams, I have witnessed the evolution of our police department. I vividly remember as a young man, the officers walking the streets and addressing you as you pass by. The nightly rounds to stores to check their security. The writing of tickets for expired parking meters. In short, the Adams police had a visible presence, and you knew who they were. Times have changed. They always do. No longer do the town's police officers walk the beat. They drive their cruisers to accomplish their tasks. No longer do they check stores after closing. Instead, they shine a spotlight on the business facade and move on. No longer do they write parking tickets for meter violations. We needed to add a town physician to make this transaction. I must admit that I cannot put a name to a face of all of our police officers. What is your take on policing, which I term resident friendly?
Sure. So I like to say that when people ask me about community-oriented policing, I like to say police have been doing it since 1903 because we have that resident trooper program where we provide a dedicated trooper to a community. So most of the people, I think, know who the resident troopers is. Some come and go, but we've had some that have been in town for 16, 12. They spend a lot of time where they are because they like it and they like the people. When I started, we did exactly that. We had Route 1 was our commercial zone, and we had that divided up into 4. We called them blocks. They're just 4 sections, and depending on what patrol you were, you had 2 out of those 4 sections to check. And what we couldn't physically see, we physically got out of the car, rattled doorknobs, and checked windows. And I'll tell you what, that was a huge success with the business owners. And there was actually business owners that said, I like being here because this is what the police do every night. And if we set off their alarm, we set off their alarm. Or a lot of times we find a door open, hey, get them out of bed, come on down here. But no one ever complained that we found their door or their window unlocked. It was beneficial to them. You got to get out of your car. You got to go talk to people. If it's your call volumes that are keeping you from doing that, you need to look at ways to implement that. There's coffee with the cop. If I'm selected for the position, I'd be more than happy to go sit down somewhere and have people come and have a cup of coffee and talk about their concerns and see what their priorities and concerns are with policing in the community. Everybody knows where I live. I've had a cop car parked in my driveway for 20 years. So, you know, I'm right on a road. So, I mean, I still get people that will see me in the yard and stop and ask me questions, or knock on my door and ask me, you know, questions about something going on, or the law, or, you know, I'll be in line at Dunkin' Donuts and somebody's like, ask me about what happened last night, and I'm like, I don't know, I haven't made it to work yet. Sometimes I sleep, you know, sometimes I'm home. I don't know as much as I'd like to know everything, I don't know everything going on. But, so people know who I am. And if, you know, if we need to, you know, put a face on the police and get them out more, then I'd be all for it. When I first started, we used to have, the local paper was very, good about running police activity and what we did, and they used to do a little, they did an introduce the police and had our little bio and what we were interested in, our hobbies, and, you know, our educational background, where we're from, that kind of thing. So that would be one way to put a face on police. But there's also other, you know, if you have an agricultural fair, you have events going on, it's a great time to get a little pop-up tent and get out there and have some seatbelt literature, or dare awareness, or, you know, some the kids love the sticker badges. So that's just a way for the police, for the community to approach the police and get to know the officers better. That's what I would look for inroads as the chief at those kind of events. I know I saw that you had a bike patrol. Hopefully that's still going. I got up here early. I rode around the town. Very nice. I took a walk on the rail trail. That's a great path. There's a lot of people rollerblading and biking, and it's a great benefit to the town. It's very nice. I would definitely want in the summer months to get cops back on bikes and get out there. And I think there was some concern about dog waste, or, I mean, yeah.
Done your research.
Yes. I'm trying not to come in cold. Yeah. So, I mean, bikes are great. We have a certified bike trainer in Connecticut that gives free classes every year, and I've sent a lot of my guys to it. It's Southern Connecticut State College, and it's like I think it's like a 4-day. So, you know, for the cost of a uniform, I'm putting somebody out on bikes that we already have. And, you know, in the town of Westbrook's, any community, speeding is going to be like a hot button. So our shoreline just explodes in the summer. You know, we have, you know, 3 times the population on the weekends than we normally have year round. And of course, there's some beach roads and people complain about the people speeding, but, you know, this beach roads are like teeny tiny. You know, you almost have to pull over for another car to go the other way. So we'd get a handheld radar and put my guy on a bike, and he'd go down and he'd be on the bike, and, you know, nobody's going to see him on the bike. So, you know, you can do that with a car. So, you know, we have a huge Durham Fair every year in Troop F's area, and you got to have bike patrol. You got to have the bikes out there. It's a great benefit. Parades, we bring them out. That'd be a great way to get people out of the cars, the cops out of the cars, and to the community.
Thank you. Just for your information, 22 years old, I co-founded the Adams Agricultural Fair.
That's great.
And we're the only fair left in Berkshire County.
Well, I hope it keeps going. That's a great experience and a great time.
Thank you.
Okay, the Adams Police Department works closely with the Adams Fire Department, the Adams Forest Wardens, EMS, Regional Emergency Management, State Police, as well as community-based organizations. What has made you an effective collaborator in your current warpath south?
Sure, I love resources. So, again, that most applicable would be back to my resident trooper sergeant activity, because there's no predominantly volunteer fire departments in the area where I work. I mean, there are some cities like Middletown where, you know, we come out, but I mean, those guys are great. I mean, fire departments are a wealth of resources for the police. So you gotta maintain those good, relationships. I mean, we would have, you know, we like to have, you know, when we have a bunch of guys retiring or we have a big promotion, we clean out the garage at Troop F and, we'd spruce it all up. We had it down with signs. But we needed tables and chairs. We don't have tables and chairs. So we call up Essex and say, hey, can we come pick up your table, you know, the fire department, hey, can we come get your tables and chairs? Absolutely. They didn't like us. They would say no, you know. You know, if there's animosity, you need to just, like, you need to stop that. And that's just usually face to face and say, hey, you know, what's going on? Like, can we work this out? You know, there was a time when, a trooper got sprayed with a fire hose years ago. And, fireman, that was on purpose. The fireman ended up getting carried away in handcuffs, and that's not what you want to see. You know, there was some like dating thing that was kind of contributed to that. But you know, after that happens, you got to go down to the firehouse and say, listen, like this, you know, let's just nip this in the bud. Like this is not good. DEP, we have conservation officers working in our areas. I know them all. There's not many of them, so you know, we rely on them, they rely on us, especially for backing people up. Again, I work with regional school systems all the time. Recently, we've been able to put an SRO on our technical school. We're at my current assignment. I think that's a huge benefit. And some of the local non-state schools are also trying to get back to that, which I think is hugely beneficial. But yeah, I'll have a superintendent call me up and say, hey, this is, you know, I'm hearing this. Is this what's going on? I'm like, okay, well, you know, let me ask. I'll find out and I'll get back to you. You know, I've had superintendents say, hey, we want to do a drug sweep. You bring your dogs in. Okay, yeah, if that's what you want to do. Yeah, I'll set it up. You know, but you just, you know, you have some ground rules about what's going to happen when you're doing that. But yeah, we're not going to miss that opportunity. That's what the superintendent asking us to come in. We're not asking, you know, if that's what you want to do, then we're going to help you out. Yeah, I just find that the more you network and the more resources you have, even within my agency, because there's different units and different people that can help us out, the more the better. So, and you know, again, just like boards, you need to have that good relationship with boards. And you know, I've been asked to, you know, come in and address the Board of Selectmen, sometimes with a joint Board of Finance meeting about budgetaries and other concerns. So, yeah, that answers the question.
Yeah. In thinking about regional and collaborative nature of the police chief position, what is your experience working with the district attorney's office?
So, we call them state's attorneys. So there's a state's attorney at each geographical location, and then there's an overall, they're actually deputy or assistant state's attorney, depending on their level, and then there's an overall state's attorney for overseeing all of them. I have a great relationship with them. You got it, because, you know, something's going to go sideways somewhere with, you know, court paperwork, or, you know, that's kind of a constant battle sometimes to make sure things are getting the court, and right things are getting the court in the right order. And, you know, with the COVID, it was even more, you know, more intense to get things there and electronically that we never used to do. I also, you know, and you're gonna have disagreements sometimes. You know, you're, you know, a lot of times you think you've got a solid arrest warrant, and you know, you're presenting it to, you know, an assistant state's attorney, and comes back, you know, denied. And okay, well, like why? You know, so you gotta have that relationship to call them up and say, you know, what am I lacking here? Like why aren't we on the same page? And if you have you know, sometimes they're just gonna flat out say no, and they don't want to deal with it. They have a lot more discretion than the police. Other times I've, you know, told the trooper, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna eliminate this, and this charge, and we're going to go with this one charge, and, you you know, I'm gonna write a memo or call them up and reinforce it with the memo and say, listen, this is what's going on, like, we're getting into a danger area here, we really need some enforcement action with this guy who's, you know, being reckless with his guns, and, you know, if you read the statute, you don't need to know where the property line is, I'm thinking of a specific issue, but it's, you don't have a good relationship with them, they're just gonna get, you know, they're potentially gonna get mad at you, and that's gonna affect things, down the line. I worked, pretty extensively with, there's court investigators, so they're like the left-hand man of the assistant state's attorney. I supervised the investigation of an extensive, burglary ring, and I had to do, several search warrants and a lot of ex parte, orders for internet and telephone records, and the collaboration there is key to get things going and moving and back in time to do your investigation.
The position of police chief requires a high degree of accountability. What does accountability mean to you in a legal sense with regard to data and metrics in terms of relations with the community?
So I think when you're the chief, the chief, really you know, the buck stops with you. You can't be there to control everything. You're not, you know, we're a 24/7, 365 organization, but you're never, you know, you're not there that entire time. So, you know, when something goes sideways, you need to hold your people accountable, but you're also, I think, in most instances, you're gonna have to also accept responsibility that what was supposed to happen didn't happen. I've always told my subordinates, like, if something goes wrong, you know, if something's messed up, tell me. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to, you know, dismiss it, brush it under. We can take care of it. You know, that's one of the things that upsets me as a supervisor, when people know that something's wrong, and rather than address it, they try to hope it goes away. I'd rather, you know, we're not, we don't work at a workbench using micrometers measuring, clock parts. The essence of our job is, taking care of things that go wrong. Hopefully the things that are going wrong are not the police themselves, but because it's an imperfect world and we're dealing with obviously imperfect situations, it can go wrong. Things can get misplaced, or hindsight's always great. Maybe we should have done something else, or we should have done something in addition to what we did. So if I know about it, we can get ahead of it and take care of it. That's my theory. So, you know, the police are not a separate entity from the community. The police are part of the community. And, you know, if something does go wrong, that's why it's important to have that firm relationships, with everything and the people we've been discussing tonight. Because if you don't, it's just gonna be worse. You need that foundation to say, yeah, we messed up and this is what we're doing about it.
So, John, we've been talking to you for about an hour, and we're done with our formal questions. Oh, you have a follow-up?
I do have one.
Go ahead. Sorry.
According to your resume, all your law enforcement education and experience is in Connecticut. Do you know if you are certified or what you would need to be certified in Massachusetts?
Sure. So, back to networking and using resources, after I talked to Ms. White, my first call, was to a former coworker who is now a chief of police in another Massachusetts town. So, he said, yeah, it's, basically, I would need to send my training records. He said there's not a Massachusetts post like we have, so I'd have to find out exactly who they get sent to. There's a comparable analysis done. If there's something, sometimes the hours don't match up. It could be something like, I don't know, domestic violence, or Massachusetts might have a different subject that they like to highlight, like we have mandatory gang So I would just have to try to get that class to satisfy Massachusetts, requirement. And then sometime over a year, I have to take some online training for the differences in motor vehicle and criminal law. And then there's an online test that I would have to submit.
You're very welcome.
Chair, I have a follow-up
Go ahead.
I should be asking this to all of the individuals that come out of, especially out of state. If selecting for this interim position, what would be your, residence or housing? Because you're from Connecticut, I'm sure you're established there. How would you deal with an interim?
Sure. So, not the optimal, condition for my family, but, you know, it is interim, it's 6 months. I'm at a position in my career where I would, like the challenge. I think I've, you know, mastered my current position. You know, schedules and overtime and schedules and more overtime, it's not my dream job, you know? I mean, I like to challenge myself, so that's part of the reason why I've, pursued promotion. That's why I've continued my education. It gives me that self-satisfaction of, accomplishment and again, challenge. So chief is the next, you know, logical, step for me. There's things going on in my agency, that contribute to my feeling that it's time to go. Some of my classmates have already gone. They're changing, part of it is they're changing the pension, so there's a clock ticking for a lot of us that are eligible to retire. I by no means am just throwing myself at this because, you know, that clock is ticking. I'm here because I think this is a good fit, and it's something that I would like to experience. You know, promotions are bogged down where I am right now, so I don't really see that. The last sergeant's test was legally challenged, so that's really damming up. They can't, you know, promote me to lieutenant because they haven't promoted sergeants and master sergeants, which we're drastically short on. There's only like 8 of me left. It should be 11 or 12. So, you know, we're the people that would be promoted to sergeant, so they can't empty out the sergeant ranks yet. So, yeah, I would find an apartment up here. I would, you know, go home, you know, not every weekend. Hopefully my family would want to come see me on the weekend. You know, we're both sides of the family are, you know, somewhat military experienced. You know, I was older when I picked up and went to the police academy for 6 months. My wife doesn't want to relive that again, but it's doable, you know. So I certainly would want to live in town and be in the community that I would be working in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So is there something that you wanted to share with us that maybe we didn't ask about? I just wanted to give you an opportunity to take this time and share something with us that maybe we didn't ask.
I would just ask, it may have already happened, but if there's anything where I fell short or you wanted clarification or maybe more, answer, that would be my question, because I don't want any of you leaving here thinking, oh, maybe I should have asked him about, you know, what he said.
Anyone?
Well, thank you.
Do you have other questions of us?
No, I think the only, the question I would have is, you seem to be on a timeline, so the problem I have is I'm ticking closer to the end of the month, which, I would have HR requirements to submit my, you know, intent to retire, so I'm just wondering when you predict, notifying.
Certainly. So, as we talked about on Monday, we are moving through a process pretty quickly. It is our intent to be in touch with all of the candidates, as early as next week with where we are in the process and potential next steps, which might include a selection of somebody.
Okay.
So, but that's still yet to be determined. That's still kind of our timeframe. Our current chief has indicated his retirement date of July 13th, right? I think it's the 13th. But has also indicated a willingness to stay on as needed for the transition. So
Great.
that's kind of where we're at.
Okay.
We've been trying to be as respectful of his date as much as possible, but COVID hit. Our chief gave us 6 months notice, which was very kind, about his retirement, and told us first week of January, and had indicated end of our fiscal year as his end date, but staying on for a couple more weeks while we go through this process.
Great.
After 36 years, he deserves to retire on time.
That's quite a run.
Yeah.
Becoming more and more scarce.
Yeah. So we're appreciative of that. Anything else?
I'd just like to thank you for your time and opportunity to be here, and I know, I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing people speak, so I'm gonna stop right here.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate making the trip and coming early and driving around our community and the nice things that you said about our community. So
Thank you.
much appreciated. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that takes care of all of our new business. I just want to remind everybody we have a meeting tomorrow. The meeting portion will be at 5:30. We do have, I think, 2 items under new business, and then the interviews will start at 6 o'clock. So we do have candidates. Both will be in person. So just wanted to remind you of that. And if there is nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I have a motion by Rick and a second by Jim. Any discussion? Yes, I need you all to say, especially with the Forest Park license. Motion second, any comment, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye, that is unanimous, so we are adjourned at 8:20. Thank you, Ed and Deb, for hanging on.
Good night.
Night.
See ya. I've already.
Yeah.